On Tuesday, President Donald Trump gave his second State of the Union speech. This was a long-anticipated speech, and we were all curious to see what was going to come out of it, mainly because the speech was originally canceled due to the government shutdown. Speaker Nancy Pelosi believed that she could not provide the security necessary to have so many members of the government in the same room at the same time in order to have such a speech. But once the government opened back up, even on a temporary basis, Pelosi was eager and willing to allow the president to give a speech outlining his agenda and the way that he wants to see the country move forward. One of the first things to notice about the State of the Union speech is it was easily not the speech that most Americans expected the president to give, and this statement could easily be justified by the speech of rebuttal that Stacey Abrams gave after the State of the Union speech was finished, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But Donald Trump was very unifying throughout the entire speech.
The agenda I will lay out this evening is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. It's the agenda of the American people. Many of us have campaigned on the same core promises to defend American jobs and demand fair trade for American workers, to rebuild and revitalize our nation's infrastructure, to reduce the price of health care and prescription drugs, to create an immigration system that is safe, lawful, modern, and secure, and to pursue a foreign policy that puts America's interest first.
Very shortly after opening the speech, Donald Trump went right into talking about American achievements from the 20th century and beyond.
In 2019, we also celebrate 50 years since brave young pilots flew 250,000 miles through space to plant the American flag on the face of the moon. Half a century later, we are joined by one of the Apollo 11 astronauts who planted that flag, Buzz Aldrin. This year, American astronauts will go back to space on American rockets.
The president made remarks relating to the fact that his ultimate goal was to grow the middle class.
Now we must step boldly and bravely into the next chapter of this great American adventure, and we must create a new standard of living for the 21st century. An amazing quality of life for all of our citizens is within reach. We can make our community safer, our families stronger, our culture richer, our faith deeper, and our middle class bigger and more prosperous than ever before.
And to a very large bipartisan standing ovation, Trump took the time to congratulate the fact that the Congress that we have currently has a record number of women, especially first-time women, in it currently.
Don't sit yet. You're going to like this. And exactly 1 century after Congress passed the constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote, we also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before.
Immediately after the speech, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went straight to the media outlets to tell them that this didn't seem like a prepared State of the Union speech. Instead, this seemed more like a campaign stop for the president. When asked, Cortez cited the fact that the president's speech was devoid of any of the promises that Cortez made while she was going on her campaign to get herself to the House of Representatives. However, unlike most of Trump's campaign stops, this speech was almost entirely devoid of any sort of directed attacks or any sort of insults or anything else that the president is very known for as he's going along his campaign tour. In fact, the only real insult or directed attack that seemed to come out of the president's mouth was one that was directed to the economic concept of socialism.
Here in the United States, we are alarmed by the new calls to adopt socialism in our country. America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve to be a socialist country.
Many of the conservative pundits on social media and their programs alike were very quick, however, to come out and remind us all of something that was missing from the president's State of the Union speech. Throughout everything that the president talked about, including when he talked about border security, the president refrained from talking about anything that involved the recent government shutdown or the government shutdown that seems to be pending in about a week and a half at this point. Many people, like Ben Shapiro, were quick to say before and after the speech that this would have been the perfect platform to remind everybody that the Democrats were the people that were responsible for the shutdown and refused to do any sort of a negotiation. However, when you looked at the speech and the completely unifying message and the fact that Trump came right out in the beginning and said that his agenda wasn't a Democrat or a Republican agenda, any talk about the shutdown and trying to pin any of this on anybody would have been completely antithetical to the message he was trying to put across. A talk about the shutdown would have been divisive, and this was a speech that was all about unity. Almost immediately after the president finished his State of the Union address, the Democrats had a rebuttal speech planned already, which was given by none other than former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. Now, this speech was actually written before the president gave his State of the Union speech, or so it would seem by the content of the speech. The first 2.5 minutes of the speech was Stacey Abrams essentially talking mostly about herself.
Growing up, my family went back and forth between lower middle class and working class. Yet even when they came home weary and bone-tired, my parents found a way to show us all who we could be. My librarian mother taught us to love learning. My father, a shipyard worker, put in overtime and extra shifts, and they made sure we volunteered to help others. Later, they both became United Methodist ministers, an expression of the faith that guides us. These were our family values: faith, service, education, and responsibility.
After several anecdotes about herself, Abrams moved on to attack the president personally, as well as his policies and his administration for the recently completed government shutdown. After this, Abrams segued into a speech about voter suppression in this country, alleging the fact that that was the reason that she lost her governor's race in the state of Georgia. All in all, the president's speech was about 90% unifying throughout the hour and a half that it spanned. It personally gave me a very good feeling about the direction that this country could go. The president himself has a direction in mind for how he wants to take the country, and he took a very good opportunity to deliver it to the Congress and the people of the United States. He vocally advocated for negotiations, bipartisan conclusions, and a great outcome for everybody in the country. In stark contrast, Abrams' speech was very personal and divisive. It was pre-written, so she probably expected the president to give a very different State of the Union speech and possibly expected him to have a more campaign-style rally in the House of Representatives. But it went further than that. Abrams' speech had an air of it's my way or the highway. She didn't want to negotiate, she just wanted to have the Democrat agenda carried as far as it could. And in all honesty, from the crowd that I saw in the House of Representatives, I don't think Abrams' views any longer represent the ideas and the feelings of the majority of Democrats in Congress. The Democrats in the House of Representatives seemed more accepting to the president's agenda than I have seen in the last 2 years since he was inaugurated. The social media feeds the next day may have told a very different story about the Democrats' feelings about the president's State of the Union address, but the immediate reactions that I saw in the House of Representatives gave me a very positive feeling for how our government may run in the next year. We may actually see some bipartisan solutions, and we might see some negotiations and people reaching across to the other side of the aisle to pull other people on board. But that's all dependent on the party leadership, the president, and the agendas that everybody is setting forward. So we will have to wait and see in the coming year. What did you think about the State of the Union speech? What did you think about Stacey Abrams' rebuttal speech? And what do you think about the general reaction of the country to the speech that the president gave Tuesday night? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at Ed's Blog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.
You're always there for me in my best hour.